Hey, what's up guys? Sir Emanon here, bringing to you a brand new video today, and this is going to be some test games that I have been preparing for YCS Niagara with against a friend of mine. Shoutouts to John here, he's Destroyer as you can see. But yeah, we've been playing quite a lot recently, and I wanted to bring you guys this video because we did something pretty interesting earlier, and that is essentially me trying to break a bunch of Pendulum boards. So Pendulum is one of the decks that is the scariest combo deck in the format. It has very ease of access to safety nets with Servant, so it can play around hand traps very effectively. It has a very easy time playing going first and second. It's consistent, it's resilient, it does a lot. So because of all of these things, I decided that I wanted to try and see how good the deck was going second, particularly with side cards. So a lot of these games are just trying to see how good the side deck theory was, as well as how good the deck itself could break boards in the event that you don't draw side cards. So even though most of these games do incorporate, the side deck, it doesn't take away from the fact that the main deck is definitely an integral part of the strategy, as you'll see in some of these games here. But yeah, we got quite a bit to go through here, so this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but what video of mine isn't long, let's be honest here. So you guys are definitely used to me and my commentary and just my thoughts in general, so hopefully you guys do enjoy this video. Yeah, be sure to let me know what you guys think in the comments down below if you want me to make this style of video more often. It is once again more sort of retrospective commentary, but yeah, if you guys are very eager to see me, I guess, comment in the moment, or do some, I guess, live commentary or whatever, be sure to let me know down in the comments. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and start with some of these games. So we did this a little bit weird. We were in a Discord call the entire time, so yeah, you're not gonna be seeing us chatting or anything. It's just well, actually I have the card images blocking the chat anyway, but yeah, we're just in a Discord call, and that's why some of these things might end up being a bit weird. We might take back plays and stuff, so just be wary of that, or just be aware of that. So he opens pretty well because he can enable Servant very quickly. Oh yeah, another thing is that Dueling Book was very laggy this session. The entire time I'm pretty sure it was server lag, and it's been this way for a while. A bunch of my other friends have confirmed that they've also been experiencing issues, so yeah, it's not been the greatest. So if you see me like shuffle my hand quite a lot, it's just to test for lag and stuff, because sometimes things just didn't go our way, and that's just the nature of Dueling Book. So he's able to make sure that his chronograph is or not chronograph, his Jackal King, I don't know why I said chronograph, his Jackal King makes him safe from like Ogre or Nibiru, or things of that nature. So very good for him. He's able to resolve Electromite pretty freely, and he also has a Zephranu. He is main decking, as you can see, a pretty heavy Zephyr engine, and as you can see with the card in his hand, he is also playing Orcust. So this is actually Pendulum Orcust, and it's a 50 card build. But yeah, so he is going to go for the standard Guard Dragon combo. So this might look a little weird if it looks a bit out of order. This happens especially more and more the later the games go. We just try and speed through the combos as quickly as possible, but rest assured, we've done many of these testing sessions before, so we know exactly how the combos are supposed to go. So no issues there. That horror was supposed to be Pendulum summoned, by the way. That's why that might have looked a little bit weird there, but it was supposed to be initially summoned. So yeah, pretty reasonable Orcust stuff. It's basically access to Crescendo, but also for Dingirsu, because when you tag out with Seal to bounce a card, Seal can also trigger to special summon an Amorphage Sloth from the deck, or Aether as well. But particularly in the case of Sloth, typically your opponent can just run over in battle, but because Dingirsu is on the board, it makes it a lot harder to actually get over and a lot more of a challenge for your opponent to actually deal with. So it's a legitimate interruption as opposed to just a battle phase, I guess, sort of, rather than just eating up the battle phase. So I opened Dark Ruler No More and Red Reboot. Red Reboot was an idea that I had theorized for quite some time, and I wanted to check it out and see if it was actually good. So the theory is that against Pendulum, if they play, for example, the Zafranyu and the Divine Strike as one-ofs in the side deck, like many people are currently doing, you can catch somebody off guard by opening this specific combo, Dark Ruler as well as Red Reboot. So the Dark Ruler would force out the Zephyr Divine Strike, and then you just respond with Red Reboot. Their Divine Strike's negated and their entire board is negated, including seal the effect to bounce a card. Of course, its other effect that activates in graveyard when tributed, it won't be negated because of that, so you will still have to deal with whatever they bring out, but it's a lot easier to deal with just, like, say, a single sloth that isn't protected by anything, and in this case, it wouldn't be protected by Dingirsu either, but that play is a little harder because this build is running both Zephyr cards and the Orcust cards, which has access to double counter traps. So Red Reboot is a little bit less effective there, but at the very least it makes it so that this 2-card combo is a 2-for-2 because this forces out one of the counter traps, you Red Reboot it, and then that forces the other counter trap instantly. So with just 2 cards, you are able to guarantee a sure eat up the 2 counter traps right away, which is pretty good progress. But in the cases where they only have 1 counter trap, you just eat up their entire board. So it's very strong, and I think that in the cases where people are expected to side a Divine Strike plus a Zafranyu package, this could be a reasonable side in. If you see Orcust cards game 1 as well as the Divine Strike, then you might maybe want to consider siding a little bit differently, but I still maintain, for the reasons I just mentioned, that it could still be useful. But that's a lot of the bulk of the theory behind me siding these 2 cards in particular. If they don't side anything to respect Dark Ruler No More, then it's just an auto win card, and if you don't see your opponent playing Orcust cards game 1, then it still is pretty safe to board and reboot just in the off chance that your opponent does in fact play the Divine Strike package. In the very worst, it's just discard fodder or cards to pitch with dangers and whatnot. But yeah, Dark Ruler is a pretty safe side in. Now the other card that I'm siding in tandem with these 2 is Cyframe Gear Gamma. The reasoning for this is that if your opponent is not able to establish a Jackal King, then Gamma is the most impactful hand trap. It's also just generically good against other combo decks as well, and I don't want to index just towards a specific deck, although it is very powerful. Gamma is also very good against other decks, like I mentioned, but also the Dimension Shifter hand trap that Pure Thunder is maining, or just at the very least siding. You have to prepare for Dimension Shifter because this deck automatically loses to that card if it resolves. So even when going first against Pure Thunder, I always side in Gamma just to ensure that if they open the Dimension Shifter, I have 6 outs to it with Call by the Grave as well. You could argue that with the Orcust cards in the Pendulum Orcust deck, you should play Artifact Atlantia in the side, or bring it in rather, but I opted not to do that for the sake of demonstrating cards that are specifically good against Pendulum. You could argue that that's not really the most productive way to test, but overall I generally think that if your opponent is on just regular Pendulums, like those are the cards you would want to side, and it's still a pretty good, I would say, valuation of how these cards that I am boarding in deals with the Pendulum board, so you can sort of come to your own conclusions as far as how good cards like Lancia would be against Orcusts. But that's a pretty long rant there, and I'm sorry about that, but there's a lot of siding theory, and I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of why I side in certain cards and why I don't side in other cards. So yeah, let's continue with this here. So I go for a bit of a risky play. What I could do right now is go for the aforementioned 2-for-2. This is the first match that I play specifically testing this theory out. Now I go for a very kind of stupidly greedy approach, and it actually makes for a very entertaining game. This is probably like the most entertaining game of the entire series, so I wanted to showcase it first. But so I'm kind of going for broke, right? If I get double red reboot here or double dark ruler, then I'm able to actually just crack the entire board as I would originally have intended. Because if I draw another reboot, then I could force out both counter traps with this 2-card combo, and then slap down the second copy of red reboot on the second counter trap, and then dark ruler resolves, and that's pretty much the same thing as if he had just one counter trap and I had one red reboot. If I had double dark ruler, we would take the 2 for 2 here and then dark ruler again, and then that would basically just be the exact same thing with no counter traps to be had. So I'm basically trying to fish for essentially 4 out of 39 cards, which is not a very solid way to approach it, but I'm basically hoping that my reboot doesn't get sniped as well, which is a very risky strategy. If the reboot does get sniped, then you actually don't have a way to force out the other counter trap, so you lose out on the 2 for 2. So in future games, as you will see, I do just end up taking the 2 for 2 and try and play through the remainder of the board. But in this case, I kind of went for broke, and you'll see what happens. It kind of works out to be pretty weird in the end, I would say. So Snake summons itself, and I go for Jackalope one more try. This is a very risky chance because he has a 1 in 3 shot at sniping it, but he doesn't get it, and we actually do draw the second copy of Red Reboot. That's kind of insane. So we Dark Ruler, he crescendos, I reboot, he goes Divine Strike, and then I reboot again. So those are obviously going to be set. We fixed it. Like I said, we're in a Discord call, so we are able to just talk through everything. So yeah, you can now see that we have a bit of a dilemma because we have a Perfuming Graveyard, but we don't have any way to actually, to actually make use out of it because we have no cards in our hand to pitch for it. And not to mention that we don't really have many Lunalight cards in general, so we still have a normal summon, so we could theoretically search check if we had the option to, but again, we have no cards in our hand. So here I'm talking over with him. I'm thinking, is it better to go battle phase to force the seal and then try and break past the Dingirsu by just attacking twice? But he tells me it's not a great idea because he can also just go Aether, and there's just multiple lines where he can basically deal with whatever I have present, and he said there's no reason for him to utilize Seal at this point, and I don't think many people would read that those monsters could just make Curious in general. So Curious is a very good card to go into here because it allows you to go into Orcust plays, and as we all know, Orcust allows you to have a lot of resiliency and just be able to crack through a lot of boards with Dingirsu, as well as just being able to set up later. Granted, I side out the Babel in a lot of these games, not every single one, but in many of the games Babel is sided out as just sort of a means of seeing which cards I can afford to side out in favor of essentially putting in 10 cards, because that's a lot of cards that you want to side in. But yeah, I get very fortunate mills here. Yellow Martin actually allows us to search for a Serenade Dance, and we have a Zephyros, so we don't have to go through the effort of summoning 4 Strix, which would probably eat up the Aether as well. He happens to actually be playing both targets for the Hieratic Seal. He's playing both the Aether and the Amorphage Sloth, so both options I have to be very wary of, and realistically speaking, you should expect to see either of those cards because some players might prefer one or the other. So if you don't know what your opponent is playing, then you should expect to see either one come out. So him having the option works best in the case of just in a vacuum testing as well. So it's good that it can basically shift depending on how the game goes. So I go for a pretty interesting play. I have my normal summon accessible to me still, but because I have a Serenade Dance, I decide that I want to discard, or rather send the Emerald Bird with its effect. That way it triggers the Emerald Bird and special summons a monster from my deck at the same time, so I get Yellow Martin back as well. So overall, quite effective things. And you'll notice that I actually go ahead and summon a Lunalight Tiger here, because the idea is that I'm going to bounce it with Zephyros, and then I get it in scale, and I have a Martin effect as well. So we have no Kaleido check here, obviously, but we have enough Lunalight names that we can actually juggle around our resources and be able to navigate more effectively, just because Tiger is such a strong card, and it allows us to get more monsters in the end. Because if this was a Kaleido chick that was summoning off the Serenade Dance, we only really have, say, like an Yellow Martin and like a Kaleido chick that can maybe set another Martin. Martin can maybe bounce a Kaleido chick. We would still have a normal summon, so it's 3 monsters. But in this case, we have Martin that's going to be summoned, Zephyros, Tiger usage, so that's 3 monsters, and then we have Martin, so that actually ends up being 5 monsters. So in exchange for potentially what looks like a weird play, we actually get more monsters out of it, even though we don't have Kaleido chick access. So it's very, very important to recognize the windows that this deck has in terms of making some rather unorthodox plays, such as summoning Tiger off of Serenade Dance, which you don't see too often, but it definitely is something that you guys want to incorporate into your plays if that is something you guys have not been considering. It is something that is a very viable option. But anyways, the replay actually crashes here soon. Not the replay, but rather my computer actually entirely freezes. It's at this point that I actually don't see him tribute off the Hieratic Seal. My computer actually just freezes. So this is kind of unfortunate, but we actually do have the replay. We did have the replay saved, and we were able to actually correct the game state and just recreate it. So I will actually jump to the point where we go into a brand new game and actually just recreate this entire game state. So I will see you in just a bit. Okay guys, so we are back to the rewinded game state, and as you can see, my opponent decides to use his Hieratic Seal on Summon of Dweller. So I'm obviously going to chain the Dweller, and the Hieratic Seal is actually negated off of the Dark Ruler no more, because even though it's in the graveyard now, it's still activated, and it's still activated on the field, and cards always activate where they resolve, even if they're not in the same location. So that means that even though this Hieratic Seal is currently in the graveyard, it was still activated and resolved on the field, meaning that Dark Ruler no more affects it. Now, and because now that I chained Abyss Dweller to its initial activation on the field, its graveyard effects cannot trigger because of Dweller's effect. So we have essentially neutralized the Hieratic Seal by just straight going into Dweller without any sort of, I guess, forewarning or notice, because my opponent would otherwise not really have a reason to just banish a bunch of Lunalight names, or the Curious. Curious would allow me to get something back, so it's definitely not something that he would want to give me access to. And additionally, he knows that I have an Orcust play still, so he would ideally want to hold it for that, or just try and go in a Sloth if possible later on, but he opts not to do that. So he maybe could have shotgunned the Hieratic Seal just to get the Sloth on the board as soon as possible. However, I had plenty of bodies. The only way that it would have worked was that if he had done the Hieratic Seal initially with the 3 dangers on the board. But again, like I mentioned earlier, not many people really read that the monsters can go into Curious, and that Curious actually can help facilitate a lot of these plays. So very, very useful stuff to keep in mind. And once again, I did get a bit lucky with the mill, but you know, luck favors is prepared, as I like to say, and it also favors, you know, deck building that gets sort of, you know, I get what's the word? Not rewarded, but you know, you can reap the benefits of luck if you deck build accordingly, right? So that's kind of my approach to it. But anyways, enough of me rambling there. We kind of talked back and forth about what the optimal line to play would be. So we basically go through it a little bit, and that's why like this is a little bit slow here. So I obviously am going to rescale my Tiger and use Martin's effect to bring it back. And I discussed a line of play where I'm possibly going to use the Nightmare Phoenix to discard this Tiger to get rid of a scale or some of the back row. The issue is, because of Dark Ruler no more, I cannot kill my opponent this turn because he won't take any more damage. So I have to get rid of not only the monster negations on his field in Vortex and the Jackal King, but I also have to get rid of the back row because it's actually going to be live on his turn. Divine Strike will be live. I have no way of stopping it. Crescendo can be easily live if he goes ahead and summons Symbol off Harp, gets or links the Symbol away, and then Symbol brings back the Galatea. And War will be live for sure. So, especially because he has a Zephyr Providence in his graveyard to protect his cards, either by the War itself, or if I try and pop either the Zephyrath or the Oracle, which I would have to pop both of anyway. So this War is definitely also going to be live, unless I get rid of it. So the Servant's also going to be live because there actually should be 2 counters on it because I activated the Tiger, but yeah, there is going to be a Servant that's going to bring out more monsters. There's going to be all these other cards, and even if I get rid of all of his cards, he actually has full scales as well in his hand. So very, 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 very powerful follow-up on his part, and I have to try and clear and chew through as much of this board as possible. So it's going to be difficult, but that's the task that we have to deal with. So I think about using Phoenix for the sole reason that I'm able to maybe make a Tornado Dragon, pop another one, and then go into an Orcust play with Dingirsu, and Dingirsu can send a third one, and then clear the monsters with just straight up attacking. The problem is that I'm left with a monster short to be able to leave this Abyss Dweller on the board, because the reason I want to leave Dweller on the board is that I need to make sure that his Orcust plays, like once I do clear his Dingirsu and his Galatea and stuff, and his Harp Horror that's underneath the Dingirsu, I want to ensure that those cards cannot actually net him any more advantage, particularly with Crescendo, because if I have to only get rid of 3 cards, I want to ensure that I get rid of the cards that are most likely to be live on his turn. Crescendo won't be live if he's cut off of his Orcust cards, is my line of thinking at this point. So I can afford to leave the Crescendo on if that means that I get rid of his entire board and prevent him from using Orcust cards next turn. So the idea is do just that, get rid of everything, and then also use the Abyss Dweller to stop his plays. However, because I'm opting not to use the Nightmare Phoenix in order to make sure that the Dweller stays online because of the number of monsters on the board, that creates another issue because he will actually still have this copy of War live, so it creates a bit of an issue, as you will see. So I go for the Tornado Dragon, as I sort of alluded to earlier, and I opt to pop the Servant. So the Servant is what allows him to be able to essentially just clear through everything, and it gets 2 more monsters. Essentially, because I'm at such low life points here, I need to be careful of any sort of OTK, because if he's able to amass any number of monsters, he can, basically make Boros Sword out of nowhere and kill me. And I want to make sure that that doesn't happen. We're playing with the cards open because we're just testing, and everything's pretty much public. This was revealed, this was known, and revealed and reset by reboot, and this was set off reboot, so everything's already known. So when you're testing with friends, by the way, Simo actually made a video about this pretty recently, if you guys do watch Simo, which I'm sure many of you guys do. But he also mentioned in his how to play test video recently that it's very, very critical to take back plays, misplays, or just maybe slightly inoptimal plays. And another potentially good idea is to just play with open hands and just public knowledge. It allows you to kind of just see with fresh eyes as far as what the optimal lines might be. At this point, I'm basically asking my opponent what's the best way to clear his own board, and he is telling me how I should clear his board. Like, he's giving me the legitimate, best route as far as how to do it, because we're trying to test for an event here. So just as a future reference, that is something that you guys definitely want to I guess adopt into your practices if you haven't already, as far as ideal testing conditions. And I think that that's pretty important to be able to integrate into your guys's just general dueling habits, if you will. So I go ahead and make the Boros Sword. Like I said, if I didn't have the extra monster of Tiger, we'd be a monster short, and this Dweller would have to be one of the materials, which again allows his Orcust to be live in the next turn. So I go ahead and revive the Galatea with the Symbol, And then you'll see that I actually opt not to shuffle back the symbol later on. I think this was actually maybe the mistake here. Off the Dingirsu, I probably should have sent the Zephyr War, because War would have been more alive during his turn. Now, the argument could also be made that because I stopped the Divine Strike, that allowed my Dweller to go through, so if I was going to go the Dweller route, then I probably should have stopped the Divine Strike from firing off anyway, so I guess there's a point to be made there. War is going to, of course, force one of the Dingirsu protections, but he has actually other ways of dealing with Dingirsu, so you'll see what I mean as we get into it. So I actually boosted the Dweller with the Orcust Nightmare, that's why I was able to beat over Galatea there. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but that's why there's that counter on him. And Borosaur can attack twice, and Dingirsu can punch over the Jackal King. So we both make a couple of misclicks here. Dueling Book is kind of annoying. So yeah, I'm not able to do anything beyond this, so I just have to hope that Abyss Dweller is going to be good enough. And I decided to actually not shuffle back the symbol. Just retroactively, I decide to shuffle back the harp because I have the symbol in graveyard. So, or it's not symbol. I'm sorry, crescendo. So if it gets back around to my turn, if I survive that long, we can add back the symbol during his end phase, and then normal summon the symbol, link away with it, and then symbol bring back the Dingirsu to send more cards, force through more things, and then just try an OTK. So that's the rationale there. Now he has a low scale that we knew he searched earlier off the Dark Worm. And you're about to see that he actually makes a pretty heads up play. He goes for a Nightmare Phoenix in order to target Tiger. Obviously I'm going to protect that with Dingirsu because that's my follow-up, so I really want to make sure that that doesn't, get stopped. But because he didn't actually have to use his Nightmare Mermaid during the first turn because he drew the Harp Horror that he Pendulum summoned, that actually gave him a bit of a window to just get 2 link materials off of the Phoenix after he forced it. So he actually drew the Zephyrin Pilica, and he pitched the Zephranu off of the Mermaid, which was super cool. It allows him to actually bring back the Zephranu and essentially just go into a Borosaur of his own. We just kind of have a bit of fun. He's like, stop putting your cards in grave. But yeah, there's no way for me to actually deal with this Borosaur that's actually just going to deal 3,000 damage to me, and he's going to win from there. So it didn't matter what I did, I was actually dead there because of actually how he ended up playing that hand out, given how he top decked the Zephyrin Pilica, which was really awesome. And I am fully aware that this is a very I actually have this in 2 OBS recordings, so this is very long, and I'm fully aware of that, and that was just the first game. But I think that this was one of the I guess in-depth explanations as far as not only siding patterns in general, like I talked about Dark Ruler and Reboot for probably a solid 5 minutes there, but also just these are just so many interesting interactions that go on. Like what would have happened if I maybe did Phoenix instead of the like leaving the Tiger there. Things could have played out a bit differently if I decided to navigate the board a little bit differently, but ultimately in the end his follow-up was just too much for me to deal with. And that's one of the advantages of playing the Orcust engine in Pendulums, is that you are just guaranteed so much recovery. And I was basically forced to keep this Dweller on the board, which made my other plays suboptimal, and it kind of limited my scope as far as how I felt the board could be navigated through. But he played that pretty well, so we're going to hop into some other games where things turn out a bit differently. Of course, we are still going to be going second all of these games, so be sure to stick around for these in just a bit. Okay guys, so this is another game that we played. Again, we're just making sure that I'm always going second and we're always doing siding. So here we have a hand of Gamma, Reboot, and of course we have to draw the driver as well. But provided he doesn't end on a threatening board, or if he can't establish Servant before I have the window to Gamma him, this is actually quite good because his Orcust play is almost guaranteed to go through if he opens well enough to just do a Pendulum summon of 2 monsters, which he's playing Pendulum, so that's always going to happen. But if he doesn't have access to both his counter traps, this reboot actually will just be able to shut off a lot of his plays. And I actually have quite a good, I guess, combo start with the Foolish Goods as well as the Tenki. So this is actually a decently promising hand, provided that he doesn't open anything too exorbitantly crazy. He has Foolish as well as the Servant, which gets obviously the Dark Worm for the gate 0. And he actually just shows me my hand. This is what I was talking about earlier with the whole like showing hands thing. So he's like, this is basically us talking about if he can enable Servant, if he can play around Nibiru or just hand traps in general. So this gives me the window to gamma him right here. So this is probably the best call. If you see that like they go into a very early Electromite, and they don't really have a way to plus super hard, and they don't really have a way to enable Servant or do anything super out of the ordinary, or just anything super safe for that matter, it's a pretty good window to negate the Electromite or just stop it. I just preemptively banished my Cyframes just because we can. So as you can see here, all he has access to right here is just a standard Orcust play. So with that in mind, we're obviously skipping steps here, so don't mind the sequencing. With that in mind, like this reboot actually just going to put in a lot of work because I know that's his only interaction. I draw a dead Gamma, but that's totally fine because we have Foolish Goods, which requires a discard anyway. So we're totally cool with that. We just go ahead and do our normal plays, wait for him to drop his Crescendo, which he's going to have to use eventually. And we have Chick Tiger, so we are able to basically just pop off. And I know everything he has access to. He has no cards in his hand, and he has just the Crescendo set, which I am able to obviously negate with the reboot. That's in response to my Martin, by the way, his Crescendo. It's just in response to my Martin Engrave targeting with the Tiger. So that now resolves, and we are able to do our Orcust combo of our own. I don't use Phoenix because the idea is that we can actually just OTK him this turn, so no need to actually try and clear the back row when I want my discard to just be one time getting rid of the Force Strikes for the Mermaid. So yeah, we have Zephyros still, so this is pretty much just going to be the standard Boros Sword OTK. Go ahead and make Boros Sword, and then we have Nightmare to, target the Boros Sword and make a second Galatea, and then we similar revives the first Galatea, and then we go Dingirsu to send his Dingirsu, and then we can just go ahead and win from there. So pretty good series of games there, or pretty good game there rather, not series of games, so it's just the second game. But we're gonna go right into another one here. So I opened Gamma and Reboot again, which is, pretty nice considering he's not opening like super amazingly broken or anything. So that's kind of the power of siding. Like I said, obviously side cards will be, a lot more favorable than if this was just a blind game 1 scenario, but in a lot of cases you just kind of accept the loss if you go second and they establish a full board. Like that's kind of just how you play this build. It's like, if you're playing this build, you just kind of lose to that kind of deck, and that's okay. It's not ideal, it's not the greatest, but yeah. He shows me that he bricked, by the way, and I show him that I basically had a broken hand, so we just move right on to the next one. I'll be showing you some other games that I lose right now, and I'll also show you some games so I don't open Gamma. I know I open Gamma a lot. I show him right away, and he actually just bricks right here. So, I mean, what can you do, right? Sometimes your opponent just bricks, and sometimes, we just open really nicely. Like, he can, like, theoretically, like, Pendulum summon and then, like, make an Electrum maybe, but, like, this isn't going to take him super far, so we just decide to restart because, or maybe not yet. We eventually decided to restart because of Dueling Book lag. It's pretty gross. Dueling Book lag kind of sucks. So we drew a reboot here, which is good if he only has one counter trap, but I think in this case he'll be able to get both of them. I don't entirely remember. He decides actually that he doesn't have to go for Electromite actually. This is something that he's been discussing, is that like there are some hands where if you open enough Zephyr cards and the Dark Worm, then you don't actually have to go for Electromite because it doesn't actually gain you additional value. And plus, if you're going to lose the hand traps, you want to at least like make sure you get to this point, so you can at least, you know, go for the Orcust combo a bit later. But yeah, like if you don't get hand trapped there, you go for the Guard Dragon play as well as the Orcust combo. So yeah, we're going to just fast forward here, and again, don't mind the sequencing. We just, you know, try and expedite the process as much as we can. Alright, so we're staring down a Divine Strike, a Crescendo, and a Bounce as well as a Vortex Negation, and we draw Driver for turns. So unfortunate, this hand is not equipped to deal with that at all. And honestly, if he actually just Crescendos or Divine Strikes this Tiger, our turn ends immediately. So that's kind of just how some of these hands go. I go for Dweller again just to try and, you know, like be a bit cheeky here. Obviously he's going to protect with Dingirsu. He's going to negate the Dweller with Vortex, that's fine. This hand just isn't strong enough to play through anything. When I go for Martin to bounce a Tiger, he chains Seal, so that I can't actually resolve Martin, because Martin has to successfully bounce the target in order to essentially summon itself, so I don't even get the body, which is quite unfortunate. I just show him a hand and I scoop right there. So if your hand isn't like super ideal or anything, then you are going to get bodied, and that kind of is just the nature of things. But like if your hand has like enough playability, then sometimes you can just get there. So he opens quite well. He doesn't have Servant, but I don't have Gamma, so it's totally fine. He once again opens Zephyr cards plus the Dark Worm, so he doesn't feel the need to be able to, or sorry, to have to use the Electromite, which he can save for later turns, which I think is pretty cool that he has the capacity to do that. But this is just standard Guard Dragon things, and it should just fast forward at this point. If I don't have Gamma, his play is definitely resolving, and even if he does have Gamma, if he has a Servant, then he's pretty much just going to be good to go. Alright, so it's actually the exact same board as last time. I have Dark Ruler and I have Reboot, which is nice. The only thing this hand is missing is Kaleido Chick. If I had Kaleido Chick, this hand would be ignore that I just said that. Completely different story. I just don't ask what I was saying there. It's kind of late. I'm recording this video late at night. But I go for, again, the super stupidly risky play. Just take the 2 for 2, guys. If you open like Dark Ruler and Reboot and they have 2 counter traps, just take the 2 for 2. But more likely than not, they're not going to be playing all these packages. Like, maybe they could be, but even if they are, just take the 2 for 2, save yourself the trouble. Don't give yourself the stress of them potentially pitching your Reboot and you just being sad because you can't actually out both the counter traps in one go. But anyways, I actually get lucky that he doesn't hit the Reboot. So I don't remember if I still go for the greed. Yeah, I just still greed for it. It's pretty bad, and I lose my Tiger in the process just so I don't lose my Reboot. Like, I want to keep as many cards in hand as possible just to minimize the odds of him actually hitting the Reboot. But just be smart and don't be like me in these early games. Like, this was still pretty early as far as me testing the actual theory of Dark Ruler with Reboot together. I rip an Emerald Bird off the top by Jackalope. So I actually just use its effect, trying to pitch and dig for more cards. He's considering negating it, but I'm telling him, like, I have more cards in my hand, like, I could potentially just be trying to force a negation, and I'm not really trying to do much except, like, draw, like, my 2 in 37 chance of Reboot, or 2 in 37 chance of a Dark Ruler, which, I mean, that's provided I already have this combo, but, like, I'd have to be fishing for side cards, and, you know, I don't think it's a worthy card to negate personally, and I really did believe that. Here I did just decide, obviously, to end up taking the 2 for 2 because I wasn't given any options at that point. So yeah, we take the 2 for 2 trade, which isn't that bad. He bounces my Emerald Bird back with the Seal, and he goes for a Sloth. So at this point I'm thinking, okay, I have to try and get rid of the, what's it called? The Sloth somehow. And I actually go for a Zephyros play to bounce the Jackalope back to my hand. I use Jackalope, I keep the Foolish set so I can maybe have an Orcust play later on. He signals which is which. And he actually hits my Emerald Bird, which is fantastic. That means that I actually get the Martin back off the Emerald Bird's effect, but more importantly I draw into another copy of Dark Ruler. So what I was going to do was just go Battle Phase here, attack, 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 attack. He would be out of Dingirsu protections and I would make my plays in main phase 2. But here we are with a copy of Dark Ruler No More, which can actually just say no to all of these cards. He hasn't even used his Vortex yet. So his entire board is now shut off. I can freely access my extra deck. I don't have to worry about Dingirsu protections, and his Vortex isn't live. Unfortunately, I don't really have Lunalight cards. So what I could have done here was perhaps made it Curious. The problem is I don't have any cards in my hand to be able to make use out of, say, a Perfume search or anything of that nature. A Perfume search for Tire would have been lovely, but unfortunately, the likelihood of me actually being able to take advantage of like another lucky mill would have been very low. Like I would have had to have milled like a Perfume and a Yellow Martin to like be able to search. Actually no, I think I banished the Serenade Dance already, so that was actually, yeah, that was already off the table. So I couldn't get lucky like I did in that first game there that you guys saw. So I just have to go for the Orcust play, which is essentially me clearing as much of the board as possible. So I go into Borosoid once again, and this Zephyros is being boosted by the Orcust Nightmare, so it can be over to Galatea. So obviously Galatea can be a shorter battle because of the Dark Ruler. So we clear the board. However, he has Orcust plays and he has a Pendulum summon, so that's why I'm saying the follow-up from this deck is absolutely ridiculous. And he hasn't used Electromite yet because he wasn't forced. He didn't feel the need to use it turn 1. So I basically just try and set a crescendo and hope for the best, but really that's not going to be doing enough for me, especially because he draws a Oracle, which essentially just nets him whatever he needs, and he actually plays Zephythubin, which will target my Galatea and just force it out anyway, or force a crescendo out. So now that you know I have 0 interaction, he's freely able to Pendulum summon, he's able to get Providence, he can Providence search another guy, and he has Orcust cards, and he has Electromite, so like he has so many things available to him, it's crazy. So this deck, guys, is very scary even with like side cards. It's crazy. This deck just has an insanely good grind game. Obviously I scoop here because he summons Symbol, makes Borosoid, brings back Dingirsu, sends my stuff, and then OTKs me. So very, 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 very good display actually, I think, of how you could possibly break boards. Like if you're given the ideal scenario, and if your opponent isn't playing like, you know, an absurd amount of like counter traps, because obviously I think the counter traps really are what, you know, have been doing me in a lot of these games. Like if I had Reboot and Dark Ruler against one counter trap, it's pretty much just good enough in a lot of these cases. We were playing another game. I lose quite a lot of these games, but I want you guys to realize that oh yeah, we lag here. That's why that happens. But I want you guys to realize that like, even though like we're testing and, you know, these aren't like, you know, the same conditions as like normal matches, I learned a lot actually. I learned a lot about side cards. I learned a lot about interactions going second against like, you know, specific cards. Like specifically Seal is one of the most important cards to be able to play through. And just, I think this is like the most explosive, like potentially most explosive Pendulum variant. Simply because Dingirsu protecting the entire board is absolutely ludicrous to be able to try and play through. Double counter traps as well as a normal guard dragon play and like a Jackal King on top of everything. It's just more than what a lot of decks, even Pendulum decks, put up. A lot of Pendulum decks just put up the guard dragon combo with maybe a Divine Strike if they like side it in, like I keep mentioning. or they just have like a dragster with like, you know, dragster, vortex, jackal, and seal, which would be, you know, swiftly taken care of by a dark ruler. But because there's so much other stuff that I have to account for, it really makes the boards much harder to crack, which is exceptionally good for testing. So bear in mind, like, you want to have tough opponents. I gamma the Electromite, and that's pretty good if I can draw like a Tenki or a Goods or a Kaleido Chick. But what do you know, I draw a Reboot, and that's not gonna help me here. I mean, it would help me if I had a you know, a starter card instead of like this Babel, for instance, but to no avail. My play is the awesome normal summon Harp Horror and pass. Attack and pass. So I just like put all my stuff on the board and, you know, just let things happen. So this is going to be a sort of different grind game where, you know, we both kind of just don't have the most ideal case scenario for us. We go a little bit back as far as, you know, what he wants to, you know, if he wants to protect his Pilica from Thubin's effect using Providence. And then like he's like, oh, I want to go Providence into Zephyr War instead of just searching Zephyr War. He pops my red reboot, which sucks. If he popped my tank or my perfume, not only would my perfume be able to search, but also I would be able to keep the red reboot. So very, very unfortunate that I actually hit the 50-50 there. But you know, what can you do? He now has a full Orcust player of his own, which is pretty unfortunate. And as you're about to see, if I have the reboot next turn, like, I'm able to just navigate through a lot of it, even with just one more draw next turn. And you might be thinking like, wow, this is like, you know, this is literally a Zephyros and a dead perfume that has no targets to special summon. Like, what can you possibly do with this? But the single draw of one danger monster actually does quite a lot. So obviously things have to go kind of our way here. Yeah, like this isn't. I shuffle my hand because we're lagging there. Obviously, you know, we're in a voice chat and we're like saying, oh, like this is just lag. So, like this is purely just testing. I know that looked kind of weird there, and maybe a little fishy, but I promise you, we are literally just trying to test. That's all we're trying to do. If this was against a random opponent, it would be a lot different. But you know, we're good buddies. We know what we're doing when it comes to testing. Like we have very weird methods, but it works. So anyways, the Goods actually forces out the Crescendo, which sucks. I kind of wanted that to go through just so I could just freely discard this Nessie. And if I had the red reboot, that would have at very least forced a Divine Strike. But unfortunately, we aren't able to do anything. Like if this Divine Strike was gone, we would have at the least an Orcust play available to us. But once again, to no avail. We just aren't able to really get going, and we basically lose on the spot there. Alrighty guys, so that's actually going to be it for this session here. I thought that we had more games recorded, but apparently that was actually it. The rest of it was just due to issues with Dueling Book server lag, like I mentioned earlier. It was not the greatest day for playtesting, but we still got a pretty good quality session in. And if you're wondering what's on screen right now, I'm just randomly spectating some Dueling Book rated games of other players, just to have something on screen right now while I talk. But yeah, I hope you guys found the this video overall just to be productive. I know I was I found it productive as far as, you know, playing in those matches was concerned. I think there's a lot to be learned about siding patterns, or about just generally navigating board states, trying to break boards, you know, sequencing, all these things. I think there's a lot to be said. And while I definitely didn't play optimal in every single game, as I'm sure that many of you guys might be able to point out, or I was able to point out in some of those games as well. But definitely, I think that it was a very, very good experience, especially when you were in a game 2 or 3 scenario and you need to try and you know, secure the victory by breaking through a not so easy to navigate board. But with that being said, I do hope that you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you guys so much for watching the video. Leave a like if you did enjoy, as well as any feedback or comments that you might have on the video in the comment section down below. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on anything that you might have as far as improvements that could be made or just general thoughts. Additionally, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more styles of videos similar to this video. I do very informative analysis type videos, and I like to be very thorough and in-depth. That's kind of my thing, as you guys can probably tell, and this video is very long, so definitely be sure to let me know if you guys want to see more, or if you want to see any changes or things of that nature. But anyways, once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will catch you in the next video. See you guys!